You know what, guys? I sent my friend Erin a link today because she was like, "Where are you?" Because I hadn't streamed in a bit on this, and I sent her a link today to a stream where I'm reading my middle school diary, which I did. It must have been at least a year ago, and she only listened to half of it. It's like, you don't even know me. It's like, you don't even know me anymore. I'm just saying. Um, Sorry, I'm just kind of catching up with some stuff here. Let me make sure I open this tab, and then we'll get started. So we're going to talk about the intimacy coordinator who worked on the film and her deposition pages. Remember, we don't have our full deposition. We only have the deposition pages that were attached as exhibits to the motion for summary judgment and related responses and judgment on the pleadings and related responses. So we're not going to have our whole deposition. We do have a fair number of pages to go over. Before we get into that, there's like this weird kind of trend of content creators online who are going over this stuff. I understand that there's two sides to this story, and so there's going to be people who feel very strongly about Lively's side, which I understand, and very strongly about Baldoni's side, which I fall into that camp. And I notice sometimes I'll see like videos going around of like TikTokers or Instagram creators or whoever will make videos like attacking, like for the sole purpose of attacking other content creators. Like, we're all human. We all have reactions to opinions, right? And so like for example, I'm somebody who's a little impulsive with my speech and stuff like that. So you guys have heard me say some pretty colorful words about some of the Lively stuff. And every now and then, because I'm not a perfect person, even though I try not to attack other creators online, I will say like, that person's an asshole or something like that, right? So I just wanted to right out of the gate say I've been seeing this stuff going around. One of them was my friend who I met at Donna Bowling's party. Her name's well, you call her Little Girl Attorney, right? And they were coming after her for her connection to the Baha'i faith, which is just ridiculous, right? Because how many of us have like share the same like faith or something like that, right? Like, I'm not a super religious person, but like, I don't judge all Christians to know each other or whatever because they've been in the same church or the same room, right? Like, it's ridiculous. And then I saw this one yesterday, I think it was, where somebody who's pretty notorious on the TikTok, right? I blocked that person long ago and I don't intend to interact with them, was like going off on Not Actually Golden for saying basically that only a person like Blake Lively, a white, like powerful woman, and don't quote me directly, like go to her video and see exactly what she said, because she put it in a way that was very like, it wasn't like accusatory saying like she's a racist. She was very specific to say like nobody but like a rich white woman could like get away with this stuff, right? Or a very powerful woman, right? And so this person comes after her and is just like, oh my God, I'm so sick of you and your misogyny and racism and all this stuff. And like, okay, but I've just noticed that going around a lot lately. And it almost seems like a lot of the times they're attacking the most rational and like measured creators. They're attacking people who are well-educated women who are accomplished in their careers. And I'm just like, do you really think that this helps get your message across? I don't think so. And I don't know that chick, right? The one who was making the video complaining about nag or whatever. I don't know that chick. I've seen her in other people's comment sections, and at one point I just was like, I'm blocking you. I don't want to deal with this. But guys, I just want to say, like, if you find yourself so triggered by someone else's social media post that you feel compelled to make a video of yourself like yelling at them and berating them and tagging them in it, and like a direct video to someone berating them, like, I'm not talking about just airing your opinion online, because we all do that, right? But like, just block them instead, right? Like, don't tag someone in a video like that where you're berating them. Like, that's intentionally kind of harassing, in my opinion. I think if you just kind of speak your mind on your own page and you're, even if you're very passionate about it, even if you swear or yell or whatever, it's like, you're free to do that. It's your space, right? It's your opinion. You're allowed to have that opinion. I'm not ever going to try to stop anyone from having an opinion about me or anyone else. But like, if you feel compelled to target someone to the point you're like making a video and tagging them in it and like berating them like that, like that's a bit too far. I don't know. I've just been seeing a lot of that lately. I've blocked a lot of people that I feel like, because there's so much hostility between creators, and when people get very passionate about certain subjects, which is why I don't talk about politics. Some people who are very, very passionate about some subjects can turn violent, and I don't like want that, right? I'm not saying that this person would be violent. I don't know her. I don't know anything about her. So I'm not saying that she's violent. I'm just saying it's the reason I block people like that who have like very, very strong opinions that I feel like are conflicting with mine, and they can't communicate with me or other people in a way that is measured and respectful. I guess it's one thing to kind of like have a Twitter page where you like call someone an asshole and be like, I don't like this person, I don't like that person. It's another thing to like message the person or send a video to the person or tag the person in a video meant for them and say like really aggressive things. Like, I don't know, that's just kind of crazy to me. So I just like to say, like, no matter what side of the ball you're on with this case or whatever, just block. If it makes you feel so uncomfortable and so angry that you feel compelled to like attack the other person directly, just block them instead. It's really not like, it's not that big of a deal, because no matter what you say to them, it's not going to change their mind, especially if you approach it in an aggressive manner. Like, just block them, right? You can have your opinion, but don't direct or target that person with like anger and aggression, because that's a whole other ball game, right? Then we're getting into the territory of harassment, which is not something that we want to do, right? So, and I guess like one video like that, that's not harassment, right? So like she made a video like that one time, and if Nag was like, please don't ever tag or communicate with me again, and she doesn't do it again, that's not harassment, right? Because it's like you've communicated with this person that you no longer want to hear from them, and they're not doing it anymore, right? That's what the. Sorry, my phone is going off here, but I'm just saying we're getting into dangerous territory with some of these things, and even at the courthouse, like people were asking me, like, were there any Blake Lively supporters at the courthouse? I'm like, well, I'm not gonna. Hold on. What? Sorry. I'm not gonna, I forgot what I was saying because my mom texted me something weird. But anyways. Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and like disparage anyone specifically or anything like that, or like say you can't do something, because like you can. I'm just saying, if you guys feel compelled to like so upset by someone that you feel compelled to like communicate with them and say awful things to them and like scary things to them, like, don't. I mean, I can tell you that's my recommendation is don't. I can't tell you what to do, in the fact like what I say doesn't necessarily mean that you don't ever have to do what I tell you to do, but I'm going to tell you what I think, which is let's not do that. So yeah. Anyways, let's get into the stuff that you guys came here for, which is not random creator drama. So, okay. So the first thing I want to do, there's 2 deposition exhibits I want to go over, and there's 2 text pages. Let's see. We'll open up the text first. So what I want to do first is show you the text, because these are the things that usually get cherry picked. And then once we go through the text, then we'll go through the full deposition pages where you can see the context for like what she said, because they asked her about these things in her deposition. And you can see why it's not necessarily how it looks, right? Let me pull this up. Okay. All right, I'll move my head. There we go. So we'll read the text first. This is the first text exhibit. Lizzy Talbot, Elizabeth Talbot, she is the intimacy coordinator who worked on the film. She's talking to someone else, George. I don't know who George is. Someone she works with, I guess. She's talking about the film. I'm only going to read the ones that are relevant. She's saying here, it's okay. Can I have a moment with each actor privately before we begin? I just want to check in about boundaries and if they don't want the other to touch a specific place, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is like, a lot of this shows you how they do their job, which I think the intimacy coordinators on set are a really great resource. I know they weren't always around, right? Like, I don't know how recent it is that they started to basically require having an intimacy coordinator, or I don't know if it's actually technically required, but these kinds of sets have them. But I feel like they're there to protect everyone involved and to make sure everybody's comfortable and nobody crosses any boundaries. Now, there's going to be back and forth between the intimacy coordinator and the director or the actors or whoever with ideas about creatively about how to act out these scenes or what's appropriate and what's not, or what kind of ideas the director might be having. And the intimacy coordinator, who's talked to the actors and actresses about what they're comfortable with, can say, no, we're not doing that. No, they're not comfortable with that. They're not doing that. And that's totally fine. That's literally the job, right? So, all right, let's see. Okay, Justin, I'll copy that. So we get to this part here where it says he's asking a lot, and so much is unscripted. Now, the unscripted that they're referring to here, I'm not going to give it away just yet, but when we read the deposition pages, you're going to see that in context, and it's not the way that people are portraying it to be at all. George says, what's he asking them to do? Lizzy says, so undress to underwear. If there's any way for me to be there, please, because this is a ton. She's asking about being there on a different day as well. And if the actors want her there, then absolutely she should be there, right? And then we'll see these texts as well, which is the second set. Okay. At base, we'll head to sets. This is again between Lizzy and George. This is wild. George says, what's happening? Lizzy says, just an entire scene of improv. Okay. Now changing all the action. George says, are they having sex on the counter yet? Lizzy says, give it time. I think we'll throw that in last minute. All good. She's obviously joking there, but like, all good. George says, I am. Are you? She says, yeah. Okay. Can we check we've got those signed nudity writers? That's right. Who would have them? Nick. She says, yeah, okay, I'll call. It's all good. We just need them done before we get to 48. So they're just making sure that the actors have executed / signed their nudity writers before they film these explicit scenes, right? Okay. I don't know if there's anything else in here. Did you speak to Justin? Yep. What did he say? Just a hand on throat and one leg. So they're talking about a scene it's not even a sex scene per se. It's actually a scene where it's implied that the father in the flashback in the movie, the father of Lily, who is played by Kevin McKidd, is violently assaulting the mother. And so that's what that's about. But it says, is this a test? Maybe. Lizzy says, rat bag. George says, did you just call me a rat bag? Lizzy says, yeah. George says, what kind of Harry Potter English Outback alleyway insult is that? So that I just thought that was funny. It's not relevant to the lawsuit, but anyways, that's between the intimacy coordinator and someone else that she works with. So let's move on to the deposition pages. Right? Okay. And there's not too many compared to some other streams we've done of the other depositions. Like I said, we're not going to get her full deposition. We only get the pages that they've included in the exhibits and the motions. Whether or not we ever see more of that, I don't know. I would assume if this goes to trial, she would be someone who would testify. So I'm not really sure, you know. Kate Bella says, I'm an intimacy coordinator all the time because my one female chihuahua is always trying to help the other one. All right, then. Let's see. Ricardo Holt, thank you for the $2. Hello, lovelies. Nag and LGA rule like Lauren. Thank you very much, Ricardo. Appreciate that. Okay. All right. Give me 1 second here. I accidentally fell into a pro Blake live stream. It was crazy. They were calling Justin a rapist. It was bizarre. Yeah. No one was raped. Whose stream was that? Like, ugh. Whoever's saying that actually like needs help. And I don't know if they're just like super traumatized to the point this is triggering or what. I don't know. Like these accusations and every angle of this lawsuit is triggering to a lot of people, including me, a lot of it. But nobody raped anybody. That's fucking insane. Justice for Clayton says, hey, boo. Hey, what's up? How's it going? But yeah, ew. That's nasty. I don't know. People will literally say the most dramatic, insane things. And I do feel like a lot of it comes from a triggered place. And that's why I'm like, I don't look at people who have different opinions than me on this and think they must be a terrible person. I really do think a lot of this stuff is just very triggering. Like I've had reactions to the subject matter in these lawsuits and the exhibits and stuff that was like very triggering to me. And you guys could probably see it because I would get angry and like say a lot of words that weren't so nice, right? But so I'll admit, like, I get triggered, right? But there's like that's like a whole other level, right? You don't want to start making accusations like that in a way that's harmful because, look, women in the workplace who face sexual harassment or abuse, and people who face these kinds of things in general, even outside of the workplace, they have a hard enough time coming forward and being believed. And then you have people who will say, like, there's a very small percentage of false allegations. But then the argument to that would come up, and people would say, like, well, how do you even know that, right? Like, how would you even know that? Like, what population are you using, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then one thing that is not helpful to women in that situation who feel like they're not going to be believed and who are trying to express that, you know, women they don't make false accusations, would then point to people like on that stream who are saying things like Justin is a rapist or whatever, and know that there's concrete evidence that never happened. It was never even alleged, and would say, see, they lie. Right. And so it's not okay to make accusations like that or huge, like, hyperbolic statements like that when it could end up hurting someone else. So, all right, give me 1 second. Meanwhile, she was pro Weinstein and Woody Allen. Yeah, right. It's pretty nutty. So, give me 1 second. We'll get into this in just. And on Epstein list, I hear. So I have heard that, but that's something I want to be very, very careful with. Because if I were to make an accusation like that or start talking about how they were on the Epstein list, and it turns out not to be 100% true, or it turns out to be like they were on a guest list for something, but they were never too involved, then that could be damaging to people who, like, you know, actually have serious ties to Epstein, and like people who are victims of those individuals. That could be damaging to them if I make false allegations against celebrities who don't end up having the same level of involvement as I think they do, right? So I feel like I want to be super careful with that. I have heard it, yes, but I cannot confirm that, and I just want to be very clear. I have no confirmation of that whatsoever. So, yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up a little bit with chat. I'm pretty sure this YouTube channel were paid plants. I don't even know. I don't know. I don't watch a lot of other channels these days unless I know the kind of content that person's going to make, if it's someone I'm familiar with, because I'm just like, first of all, I just don't have time. Second of all, you never know when you're going to end up on the wrong corner of the internet. So I try to avoid that. But all right, anyways, this is Lizzy Talbot, the intimacy coordinator. She's being deposed. Okay. Let's see. So I guess this is Fritz and Rosser. So Fritz is Kevin is Justin's attorney, Wayfair's attorney, and then Stephanie Rosser, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I mean, no disrespect, I just don't know how to pronounce it. Is Blake's attorney, right? Okay, so the attorney whoever's deposing right now says, we're starting with the standards and protocols for the use of intimacy coordinators. Are you familiar with this document? Lizzy says yes. She's seen it before. She's read it before. Okay. Does SAG, Screen Actors Guild, require the use of intimacy coordinators, or is it suggested or recommended if you know? Lizzy says prior to the agreements, I think in November 2023, it was a recommendation. Post that, it is best efforts. Okay. Which agreement are you referring to? She says it's the agreement that was sorted out in November 2023, post the writer's strike and the actor's strike. Okay. The lawyer says, when prior to November 2023, what was your understanding of when it was recommended that an intimacy coordinator be on set? Lizzy says, for scenes of simulated sex and nudity. Okay. And do you know if SAG defines nudity? Lizzy says, so nudity for us is defined as anything that would be seen underneath a bikini for a female and underneath a pair of Speedos for a male. I like how she said pair of Speedos. It's just a Speedo, but you know, whatever. So keep that in mind. Nudity is anything that you would see underneath a bikini, which could get a little tricky because there's all kinds of different bathing suits, right? But like, let's think back to the birth scene where we saw she had black briefs on underneath the hospital gown and the prosthetic belly. That was not anything that you would see outside of, like, underneath a bikini. So they were saying, like, it was a high hip line. Maybe you could see, you know, it could be questionable. We'll get to that part of the deposition. But anyways, it's not anything actually nude. The birthing scene. That's what I'm saying. Like, legs are not a controversial body part. I'm sorry. Right? Okay, anyways. Prior to November 2023, was an intimacy coordinator required to be on set for kissing scenes? She says no. And then remember, they cut out some pages here because we're not going to see the whole thing, which is frustrating sometimes. But she's answering a question here. She says, I believe I had a conversation with Justin's assistant, who added in Blake's assistant, and that's how we navigated the time for the call. Okay. So at some point in early May, you had a phone call with Blake Lively. She says, correct. Was anyone else on the call? Yes. Who was that? Lizzy. Okay, Lizzy Strasberg is Blake's attorneys, one of her attorneys, who wrote or helped her with the whole 17-point list thing, right? And do you recall what was discussed during the call? Lizzy says, yes, I started on the phone with Lizzy. We had a conversation because I think she recognized me and I potentially recognized her from another project. Either we had worked with the same actor or there was some familiarity between us. So we were on the call together first. And then Blake joined. We discussed Wrexham Football Club because I grew up in Wales. And then we started to discuss what my role was because she had not worked with an intimacy coordinator before. Wait, I didn't even notice this before. Blake has not worked with an intimacy coordinator before? That's kind of... Huh. I didn't realize that. I guess she's saying November 2023 above. She was saying November 2023 is when it became kind of best practice. But still, like I said, guys, there weren't always intimacy coordinators around. And I heard a lot of the actresses from the show Wentworth, which is my favorite show. It's actually an Australian prison drama. I've gotten to go to a lot of conventions where they are. I edited some show reels for the actresses before they would come out on the stage. And so I got to meet a lot of them at those. And they would explain to me that there weren't always like intimacy coordinators and stuff in film and TV. And like, it's very important for them to have that so everybody's safe. So I guess maybe Blake hadn't used an intimacy coordinator before. I don't know. But it sounds like that's what she's saying here. Okay. Personally, I think I would think that they should always be used in the future, right? She described some previous scenes in her career where she had felt unsafe, and I then asked comfort level, her boundaries, and said that I was going to send her Justin's vision and ask for those scenes that would be within her consent and boundaries, and that I was going to remove anything that was not, and that I was going to provide her with nudity writer language and to contact me if she needed or wanted anything else. The attorney asked, did she ever contact you to say she needed or wanted anything else? Lizzy says, or not Lizzy, sorry. Lizzy says no. When she referred to feeling unsafe in scenes on other projects or prior projects, did she specify what those projects were? She says no. Did she specify why she felt unsafe? Lizzy says, not that I recall in specifics, but I would say that is a common refrain from many actors that previously they have had negative experiences with these scenes. Okay. The lawyer says, did she tell you what her comfort level was with respect to intimate scenes? Lizzy says, correct. We talked about what she was happy to show, what she did not want to show, the extent of touching during these scenes, specifically in regards to Justin's request here in the email. Okay. The lawyer says, and what did she say in her comfort level was in terms of what she would show and would not show? Lizzy says, we talked about, I believe it's in the nudity writer language. So I believe it is no nudity that would be seen underneath a bikini. Right, and at no point was there that kind of nudity in her scenes, right? K Bella 25 says, Lauren, do you remember when you told us people mistake you for a 17-year-old boy? I died. I never thought that, but it made you my internet friend. Dude, it totally happens. Especially over like drive-through intercoms, right? If I'm going to the drive-through at like a Wendy's or something, they always call me sir because they think I'm somebody's kid brother. But thank you for the 5. I appreciate that. All right. I need to watch Wentworth. It's on my list. I think if you're in the States, I think it's on Amazon Prime now. I could be wrong. Used to be on Netflix, but it's my favorite show ever, hands down. I don't think anything will ever beat that. So, all right. Okay. nudity that would be seen underneath the bikini. And in terms of simulated sex, there was to be no simulated oral sex, okay, either implied or actual, and that there was to be no touching of breast or groin area, okay. The lawyer says, okay, and what about orgasms? Lizzy says, that was not discussed because, well, I don't recall discussing that because I believe that was not in the request at this point. And remember, like, they're asking about a specific time frame. And a lot of the stuff that Blake's lawyers will try to point at it is that Justin added all this unscripted stuff, but scripts aren't changing. Directors improvise in the moment. And with the intimacy coordinator there, they're allowed to kind of bounce ideas off and say, like, what if we did this? What if we did that? I want to do this. I want to do that. And the intimacy coordinator can then step in and say, no, the actor or the actress isn't comfortable with this or that, right? So just keep that in mind as we continue to go through these pages. All right. Okay. Justin didn't request that. Lizzy says, not in. I would have to refer to this, but it's not something that I brought up with her because I believed it to be off the table at that time. Okay. And this is Kevin. I guess Kevin is doing the deposition. Kevin rocks. We like Kevin. Let's see. Prior to meeting with or speaking with Blake on April 5th, did you request to meet with her or speak to her in any earlier than that, if you recall? Lizzy says earlier than. Kevin asked May 5th. Lizzy says, yes. Do you recall when you first sought to, and then unfortunately, I think it cuts off there, 60 to 69. Yeah, so it cuts off some pages there, so we have to move on. The question is the birth scene one of these 5 here? Lizzy says, no, it is not. So I guess that's something involved in like the nudity writers and the scenes, the intimacy scenes that they're going through. But the birthing scene wasn't an intimate scene. So like, okay. Have you seen the movie? Lizzy says, yes. Oh, this movie. What movie did you think they meant? Not in its entirety, pieces of it. Okay. The attorney says, have you seen the birthing scene? She says, I have. Do you recall any nudity in that? She says, I don't recall any nudity. There was a high hip line that may have been called profile nudity to an extent, and that some actors would require or request a nudity writer for. Do you know if Blake requested that? Lizzy says, no, this was not on our discussion. Okay. What's that, guys? Prickly Pear 87 says the birth scene had implied nudity, so I think it's supposed to count. That's the thing. It's not implied nudity if it's nothing that would be seen outside of a bikini, which is what she was saying above. She had briefs on. She had a hospital gown, a prosthetic belly, and black briefs on. That is not something that would be seen underneath a bikini. Like a bare leg, the side profile of a bare leg. She's saying it may have been called profile nudity to an extent, and that some actors would require or request a nudity writer for. So this is not a hands down requirement, and she's saying it may have been called profile nudity to an extent. So it's basically like she was wearing a bathing suit, and that is not considered nudity. So, all right, let's see. I think Paul Feig would he have said nothing, and she going by her standard would be in trouble. I don't know about Paul Feig. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to do a sequel to those Simple Favor movies. I'm not sure. I agree, but Blake makes up her own rules. Well, SAG rules don't. Blake doesn't make the rules for SAG, so that's going to be the thing. But I understand what you're saying, though. I get it. But yeah, she doesn't get to make the rules for the entire Screen Actors Guild. That's not how that works. So. But I do understand what you're saying, yes. Okay. Again, Blake didn't request that, right? So what requests were made? They're asking a question here, and they skipped over some pages. What requests were made not in my presence? But to your knowledge, are you aware of any? Did you see anything and say, hey, we should have this safeguard in place, and it wasn't there? The answer is the birthing scene could potentially have had a profile nudity rider below the waist for profile nudity below the waist. Again, that's from a very quick viewing of what ended up on the film. And I cannot say with any concrete evidence not being there of what else needed one. So she's saying potentially they could have had a profound nudity rider, not saying they definitely needed one or anything happened wrong, right? There's no other scenes that she identifies in that, saying that she like wasn't there, so she can't really, say. Was your presence or involvement for kissing scenes required? Required by who? That's sometimes, again, with the actor who was in it, and I guess it skips some pages there. She's talking again, sometimes again with the actor who is in a tube top and sweatpants looking in the mirror. No, they're fully clothed at that point. So she's talking about, I think, implied or inferred nudity. There may be times where an actor is wearing a stick-on bra, for example, where you may have a naked back, and we might close the set for an actor's comfort at that point. Again, this is a very nuanced job with everyone having a very different experience and comfort level, and various factors play into this role. The only real hard and fast rules that we have are the nudity rider and the simulated, as in the nudity rider that includes the simulated sex and nudity. Okay. And if you could also turn to the exhibit here, which is the quick guide for scenes involving nudity and simulated sex. She says, hang on. Okay. I don't know if it, yeah. Okay. It continues on the next page. There's 4 bullet points there. One of them is a requirement for appropriate notice of nudity in simulated sex. And that applies for a role, this is the attorney speaking, and that applies for a role, and I believe that you mentioned earlier that it is the responsibility of the director to notify an intimacy coordinator as soon as they envision a scene that would include either simulated sex or nudity. Lizzy says yes. If it's a new one that they are introducing or a new element of the scene that they are introducing, yes. Okay. Also on that page, the 3rd bullet point, there's a requirement for writers that outline the parameters of nudity and simulated sex, correct? She says correct. And if you turn to page 3, it states, a performer's performance or depiction in a scene requiring nudity or simulated sex acts is conditioned on their prior written consent to which should take the form of a writer attached to their contract. Do you see that? She says yes. Okay. And does this say performance or depiction in a scene requiring nudity, correct? She says depiction of the simulated sex acts. It says here a performer's performance of, or depiction in a scene requiring nudity. She says yes. Okay. We can skip to the next page there. Okay. This page is not something we need to read. It's just the attorneys talking and shit. There's an email. Okay. The first, they're talking about an email exhibit. It says, the first line of the email reads, I've attached a watermarked script for you to read. Do you see that? She says yes. And the attachment to the email appears to be a script for It Ends With Us dated March 3rd, correct? Did you review the script when you received it in March or around that time? Yes. Did you review the entire script or just specific scenes? Lizzy says, when she sent me the script, I read the script, but there were also, either prior to this or shortly after, there were 2 scenes that were attached in an email. I believe that this was the one with the whole script in it. Okay. Right. Make sure they don't skip any pages, right? They skip some pages here. Okay, so she's talking again, but I don't have the context for the question. So because it starts on a new page. She says, no, it's actually something that we try and stay away from, quite honestly. One, because it's not often that realistic in terms of scenes of female gaze that he was after. Okay, so these pages start to talk about Justin Baldoni's kind of vision for the intimate scenes in the film. And she talks to him and explains, like, this isn't like typical, or I don't think this is realistic, blah, blah, blah. And this is all part of the creative process. So her saying to him, this vision of the scene, I don't think it tracks. Like, I don't think it's realistic. Doesn't mean that he did anything wrong. It means they're bouncing back and forth ideas or his vision for the scenes. And she is telling him, you know, what would work and what wouldn't work. So people will say, again, like I said, like unscripted intimacy, or like he's trying to add gratuitous scenes into the film, but it's like he's just bouncing off the intimacy coordinator what is and is not going to work in the film. And even, and I'll say this right now, even when she starts to describe their days of filming, the way he's kind of like bouncing back and forth and saying, now we do this, now we do this, now we do this. My impression of these pages was, it sounds like she's describing someone with ADHD, which totally tracks. So you be the judge, but we'll get there. JT, thank you for the $5. My neighbor's a stuntman at a neighbor's party. She showed us the modesty sock, so she's wearing more than most men. Oh, that's definitely true. Yeah. Thank you, JT. All right. So, anyway, she's talking about these scenes that she's going over with Justin. She says, it's not often that realistic in terms of the female gaze, and we can figure out what they're talking about here based on the next couple paragraphs. So we often try and stay away from simultaneous orgasms. And again, that's a question that male directors will ask a lot. So she's a lot of the stuff she says is like, that's typical for a male director to ask, or it's not bad to ask that, right? It's just not realistic in her view. Okay. According to Lizzy, they'll often say, oh, they should come together. And we, if they're after the female gaze, we might offer an alternative. Okay. Did Mr. Baldoni suggest to you that the characters should simultaneously climax? She says, I don't recall him saying that specifically, but again, I would have said, if you're doing it for the female gaze, you may rethink that. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Lizzy says, if you're doing that for the female gaze and authentically, you may want to rethink that. The lawyer asks, in your conversation with Mr. Baldoni, did you offer as an opinion that Mr. Baldoni's character and Miss Lively's character should engage in simulated oral sex? She says, again, clarifying question, what happens here? It's not a suggestion, oh, you should do this. It's a, what is happening here? Is it this? The script is indicating this. Is this your vision? Is this what you're hoping to achieve? Okay. And so the lawyer says the script had indicated potentially simulated oral sex, correct? She says, correct. And you were asking a clarifying question about whether that would be included, and if so, how? Lizzy says, correct, because it, again, it's a call back to the book where there is, okay, important here, it's a call back to the book where there is definitely implied oral sex going on, and it's a very similar scene. So Blake is all up in arms, and I believe I heard this mentioned in a hearing where he wanted to add a scene where the characters, the female character gives, you know, performs oral sex on the male character. And she was very upset about that, which she didn't end up having to, she did not end up having to do that because that's kind of what this process with the intimacy coordinator is for. You don't do anything that they're not comfortable with, right? And so I just want to point out here, because people keep trying to say that he was adding gratuitous like sex scenes as if he's some sort of pervert, as if this is what directors in a creative project that involves sex, you know, they do, right? A lot of these scenes end up being stuff that's in the book, and even she herself admits here, or not admits, but even says it's a callback to the book where there is definitely implied oral sex going on, and it's a very similar scene. So Blake was very upset about the Justin having the prospect of adding an oral sex scene into the movie. It was in the book, and if she had read the fucking book, a lot of this stuff wouldn't have been, hopefully wouldn't have been as offensive to her or as surprising, but she just wouldn't, I guess. So, all right. So again, a clarifying question as to whether this is the same. Are we trying to recreate that scene, even if it's not explained in the script particularly clearly that that's going on? Because again, as I said, the scene in the script didn't make sense as written. That's what Lizzy's saying. The eyes rolling back in the head seem to suggest orgasm. Is that what we want to see on screen? So she's kind of explaining her process and how they discuss things when they're reading the script, and then the director is giving his vision for how that actually looks on the screen. Okay. And I think they skipped some pages here. Yep, they do. All right. Talking about the drafts. Do you recall after you signed onto the film receiving a version of the script that included additional sexual content? She says, yes, this is the script I would have received. And again, the changes have been made. So like the script evolves. Things change. The original script that's given, it doesn't mean that that's rigid and set in stone and nothing else can ever change. He can ask the intimacy coordinator and the other people involved, what if we did this? What if we did that? It doesn't mean that he's doing anything wrong, because they can say no. And the intimacy coordinator can say no, or even, I don't think this makes sense. So they act like he did all this weird, creepy stuff that was like out of bounds, but it was part of the process. It was part of communicating. It was part of, you know, coming up with his vision of the scene and how they could bring that to life while keeping everyone involved safe and comfortable. Give me 1 second. Okay. So I'll just ask my question one more time so we have an answer. Do you recall after you signed onto the film that you received a version of the script that included additional sexual content that was not included in the original version? She says, they said just generally, I'd have to check. I don't know if I could categorically say one way or the other without reviewing it. Okay, fair enough. Towards the bottom of the page, there is a bolded heading that says bedroom. Do you see that? This scene reads, where Lily turns, pressing her mouth against his, and then throws him on the bed on all fours. Lily playfully crawls up his... Why am I reading this to you guys? This is not what I signed up for. Lily playfully crawls up his body, mounting him, her hand lacing behind his neck as she pulls him up in a seated position, the two now entangled. And it's gross because I know I'm talking about two people who hate each other. So, ugh. Do you see that? Yes. If you go to the next paragraph, it reads, with strong arms in one swoop, Ryle plants, and then it cuts off there because they skipped some pages, and thank God they cut that off because I did not want to continue reading that. That was way too much for me. All right. Don't blush. It's a little late, bro. Ryle plants. What did Ryle plant? The people want to know. Not me, the people. It's like if I'm just sitting there reading a book with this stuff in it, I wouldn't think about it twice. I'd be just like, oh, okay, I'm just blah, 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 reading along. But like I was sitting here on a stream trying to explain like mechanical things to people. And we're talking about two people who really don't like each other and definitely don't want to have sex. And so I'm trying to read this and I'm thinking like, no one involved wants this to happen. And nobody knows what Ryle planted. Okay, it cut off. So we're gonna move on. Thank fuck for small miracles. Okay. Lizzie's answering a question here, but we don't have the question because it cuts off and it starts here. It says, have gone through complaints against other actors, complaints against various members of the casting crew. So I'm pretty careful about what to keep on record and what I get rid of. Okay, so other than the documents that you provided to your counsel, you don't have notes regarding your conversations with Baldoni and Lively. She says, correct. Do you recall at some point in April of 2023, Mr. Heath providing you with a list of scenes in the script that he deemed to involve intimacy? She says she believes A.J. Marbury, Baldoni's assistant, provided that. Okay. One more question about the script. Did you suggest to Mr. Baldoni that he include in the script oral sex? She says no. Dude, again, that's not like a crime or like him doing something wrong. It was in the book. She said above, it's in the book. So like they're asking her that question and they're obviously still trying to get at Mr. Baldoni's a creepy guy for suggesting an oral sex scene when it's like that's in the source material that the movie is based on. So get over it. No. Okay, please turn to this exhibit, blah, blah, blah. There's an email. It says, Mr. Heath had compiled in this email scenes that he writes have any sort of intimacy, correct? Any sort, yes. Okay. This list includes scenes with undressing, for example. It includes scene 38, which involves kissing and grinding, right? Yes. And it includes a number of scenes, including, and then there's some scene numbers that involve kissing, correct? The birth scene is not on this list, correct? She says, correct. And this list also, there's no kissing in the birth scene, to my knowledge. The characters had already broken up. He was abusive. She escaped him. She was having the baby. He was in there, but like there was no kissing. Unless they're counting like a kiss on the hand, which is like, dude, that's not, no, we're not doing that. We're not actually whining about that, please. And this list also doesn't include a scene in which Mr. Baldoni and Miss Lively's characters are dancing, correct? Right, and there was no kissing in that scene either. Again, nuzzling or whatever, that's not kissing. So, like, this is kind of what the lawyers and even the judge, to some extent, when he was asking questions, he didn't outright say this, but he was asking questions about this, would say, like, where's the line when it comes to improvising and directors in a scene directing the characters or acting in character? Where's the line to where it's like that crosses the line? Surely we can't go to federal court every time somebody, like, moves a hand somewhere they're not supposed to, right? Or like moves a hand to a part of the back they didn't explicitly say they were going to before. So, right. Okay. Are you familiar with the scene in which Mr. Baldoni and Miss Lively's characters are depicted dancing? She says, only from the media presence surrounding it, right? Are you familiar with the scene in which Miss Lively's character gave birth? She says, yes, correct. And fair to say that you understood the birth scene was not to involve nudity. She says, correct. Otherwise, there would have been a nudity writer. And there was no nudity. So, did you understand whether the birth scene would involve partial nudity? I believe you mentioned earlier a high hip profile. She says, sorry, no. Can you explain what a high hip profile means? She says, yes. So do you remember I was dividing the body up into 4? And obviously we can't see that. So there's going to be stuff we miss. Yes, front and rear. So in addition to that, we would also occasionally talk about profile nudity. So for example, above the waist, it may be that you see profile breast, but not nipple. And at that point, they would typically require a nudity rider because we're seeing something that would not be outside of a bikini. And again, there was nothing in the birthing scene that you would see like outside of you would see only what you would see outside of a bikini, right? Okay. And then it skips a page here, but she's still talking about this. She says, padded thong, that is typically what we would give people for a scene of missionary. And what you would see is 2 people like this. And then she makes a gesture that I don't know what the gesture is. I guess I could try to make a gesture for you guys. I mean, what would you... Like, I don't fucking know. Like, I don't know what to do. Anyways, anyways, that's my interpretation of her hand gesture. Casey, thank you for the $5. Her complaint was written to sound scandalizing to people who have no familiarity with filmmaking. That's definitely correct. So, all right. Who comes to a YouTube review and complains about it being reviewed? People are wild. What are you talking about? Anyways. JT, thank you for the 20. Chris McCary, I don't know if I said that right. Director of Michigan movies. Or MI movies. Michigan? MI? Or is it something else? MI? Admitted at a Q&A that he's never finished a script halfway through his movies. Has whole movie in head, but pain to put on paper in a way he's hunted. He's ADHD. Yeah. So lots of directors don't do things this rigidly. And surely Blake Lively knows that. And so that's why it's like, well, I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. It's ridiculous. Like, she knows how the industry works, right? And she's complaining like somebody who doesn't. So it was not her first film or show or whatever. I mean, she's been, what was that movie she was in, Savages, where the male actor even said with Blake Lively there was a lot of sexual improv? Like, dude. I'm just sad Omar wasn't here to listen to you read this smut. Where's Melissa Nathan to isolate this video? Shut up, man. Oh my God. Okay. Let's see. Did I see Savages? No, and I'm not going to. I'm going to pass on Savages. Let's put it that way. Okay. All right. She says, what you would see is 2 people like this. However, there's a barrier in between them because you have that padded strapless thong on. What you do not have is anything around the waist. Does that make sense? Okay. She says, so if you are not wearing anything around the waist, we don't yet have bikinis that are attached at the front and the back only. That is something that we can use as intimacy coordinators in our world of terminology that we're restricted to by bikinis. Okay. The lawyer says, Mr. Baldoni never shared with you that he intended the birth scene to include profile nudity, right? And again, this is subjective. So what we've seen so far suggests that this is a subjective thing, the profile nudity. So, all right. Mr. Baldoni never shared with you that he intended the birth scene to include profile nudity, right? She says, my understanding is that she was going to be in a hospital robe. And she was. She had a hospital gown, a prosthetic belly, and black briefs on. Okay. So he did not share with you that it might include, and then it cuts off. Hang on. Mr. Baldoni did not share with you that he intended the birth scene to include profile nudity. She says correct. And like profile nudity, again, subjective. There's nothing in that birthing scene that I would consider to be something you would see outside of a bikini, which is the standard here. Correct. If you understood the birth scene was going to include profile nudity, would you have discussed the scene with Miss Lively? Yes. And would you have requested to be there that day? She says, if it involved a nudity rider, I would have said, absolutely, I should be there. During your phone call with Miss Lively and her counsel on May 5th, you discussed what kinds of intimacy Miss Lively would be comfortable with, right? Correct. Did you discuss whether she would be comfortable with open mouth kissing? She said, we discussed there was to be no tongue during kissing, but that is almost something that I had been brought up previously with Mr. Baldoni as a question that I had shut down and said there was to be no tongue during kissing. Again, they're talking about the boundaries of the actress. These are conversations they're supposed to have, right? She says, because that's typically, we often just don't need it unless it's specified in the script that there is like a lick or something like that. Like a lick? Like licking cookie dough off a spoon? Just saying. Our standard understanding of kissing is that it can be open mouth, but it can't be with tongue. Okay. There's so much mechanical stuff that goes on behind these scenes that I just don't even like. You don't want to think about that, right? But because of all this, here we are. Okay. The lawyer says, but Miss Lively shared with you that she was not comfortable with tongue. Okay. The intimacy coordinator says, correct. Did she also express that she was not comfortable with simulated oral sex? Correct. I believe that she had been, again, taken off the table, but I would confirm that with her. Right. The lawyer says, Miss Lively confirmed she was not comfortable with simulated or inferred oral sex, correct? She says, you will see in my email to her that it is crossed out. Okay. Did you discuss with Miss Lively and her counsel? And then it cuts off there to a new page. So, right. They're just getting an exhibit here. It's talking about the birth scene. The call sheet does not indicate that the set will be closed for purposes of the birth scene, correct? She says correct. So when we do a closed set, we would specify the scene for which it would be a closed set. The lawyer asks, on a call sheet next to the scene, it would include a box or red letters or something that says closed set? Correct. And can you describe for me what a closed set is for the purposes of intimacy and nudity? She says correct. So for scenes of simulated sex and nudity, a closed set is where we send out closed set protocols, which list exactly what the procedure is for the day. You would potentially have a copy of those. Okay, I wouldn't be able to tell you the word for word on what's the closed set protocols, but generally speaking, closed sets for purposes of intimacy and nudity limit who may be able to be on set during filming of an intimate or nude scene, correct? She says for scenes of simulated sex and nudity, yes, there would be closed set protocols that would specify who needs to be in the room. So what they're trying to get at here, Blake's attorneys and their complaints, and Blake's complaints, is that they say Steve Sarwich showed up during, basically on the day of the birthing scene where there was like profile nudity, as she would describe it. I don't agree that it was nudity, but it's subjective apparently, but you know, it is what it is. They say that Steve Sarwich basically went to the set during the birthing scene when it was a closed set and he was not necessary to be there. That is apparently not true. Steve Sarwich visited the set that day. He was not present for the birthing scene. So that's an important distinction, but that's not what they're going to say, right? Because that's not scandalous enough. Okay. There is often an addendum that I put on to my closed set protocols because sometimes you're working with animals and you may, what? Oh, I get it. Okay. Sorry. I thought we were still talking about nude scenes. She's just talking about closed set scenes in general, but I guess some movies are interesting. There might be some nudity around animals. I don't know. I feel like I've seen that in a film somewhere, probably. And you may need an animal handler, and that might not be a typical person that you would put on a closed set protocol list. Okay, right. The attorney says, while we locate the protocols, is a production's responsibility to identify when the set will be closed for purposes of intimacy or nudity. Lizzy says it's often a collaboration. So, for example, I can suggest when scenes might be closed depending on what the content is and what we're seeing and what we're not seeing. But obviously, any scene with simulated sex or nudity is automatically a closed set. Okay. It's talking about the protocols. Is this, the lawyer says, is this a closed set protocol document that you created? She says, yes, this is based on the original HBO closed set protocols. This is not a document I would send today. My document that I send out now is longer than this and a bit more restrictive. But again, that's because over time, as we've done more and more of these scenes, we're encountering slightly different things because productions vary so much that we would add things into this that potentially may not have been there in 2023. They say protocols for a closed set have changed over time. She says, yes, I would say that. I mean, this is accurate for 2023, but if you showed this to someone in 2025, I would expect to see more things on here. Okay. And they ask about the protocols for a closed set, saying outside monitors will be turned off. The director and DEP monitor will be covered by a tent or with flags. The protocols also include that a list of who will be at the monitor be communicated to the actors before the scene. She's saying correct to all this stuff. So Actors involved in intimate or nudity scenes should understand who is on set while they're performing their scenes. She says, yes. So that would be communicated to actors, and it may even be something like, just so you know, people on the monitors are going to be XYZ. Okay. I've had actors who have opinions about who those people are, whether they want additional people, because sometimes they want additional people, whether that's reps that are visiting for the day, whether that's, you'll see here in that additional support personnel. So they may also be on the list. The lawyer says, in the event of a closed set, again, for intimacy or nudity scenes, there would also be members of the costume department, for example, to ensure that actors were covered during breaks. She says, correct. And non-essential personnel would be asked to leave set when there is a closed set due to intimacy or nudity. Lizzy says, correct. Okay. In the event of a closed set, access on phones or iPads, what's being shot, would also be limited. Correct. She says, yes, that's something that would be an additional insert here. And would it also be appropriate for a closed set to collect cameras or recording devices to ensure that no one is recording the scene without the actor's consent? Lizzy says, collection doesn't always take place. It's more about putting them away. They are not to be seen. So they're not going to take like your phone away, but they don't want to see them out. So you shouldn't be recording on your phone at that point. Okay. Lizzy says, I've worked on certain shows where there's a specific requirement to collect and put aside mobile phones. Or another option that we often use is to hand out stickers because, again, people use phones to communicate so much, whether that's, if there's lighting issues, any emergency, we would have some form of communication device. So one way to manage that is to put stickers on the cameras. That makes sense. I never thought about that. You would hand out stickers. She says to cover the camera of the phone. Yep. Okay. That's, again, different productions work in different ways. This cuts to another part of the deposition. Let's see. The call sheet indicates a dance montage. We know about the dance, right? Wayfarer did not call you for that day, right? She says correct. And as a result, you were not present. She says correct. Okay. You understood that scene 40, the dance scene, would not include intimacy. Is that right? She says, I understood it to be a slow dance. My expectation there is that actually there may be a choreographer. A dance choreographer? She says correct. That would be more likely depending on the type of slow dance. Did you have any understanding as to whether scene 40 would include any kissing? She says there was no mention of kissing. They said no mention of kissing in the script. She says correct. Right. So as you guys know, we've all seen the footage, right? They don't kiss in the dance scene. The thing is they almost kiss. And so that's even what Justin is saying. And Justin and Blake are talking to each other about. They're saying like they don't give the audience the kiss moment. They like kind of go in for it. And then there's tension, but they don't actually kiss. I can't believe I'm having to explain that. It's like not that hard to understand. But whatever. And so when it comes to like, she was saying like he was nuzzling her or whatever, that's kind of like what they were getting at in the hearing where it's like, it's not like sex or making out. You know what I mean? Like, so what's the line? What do you draw the line at when it comes to how far is too far and how much is creative control on the part of the actors and the director? For example, like putting your face up to someone's ear or something, like that's not, why are we in federal court for that? That's fucking stupid. So yeah, give me one sec. Okay, so here's page 50 of the attachment they're asking her about. It has to do with the dance scene for Lily and Ryle. It says, Lily and Ryle slow dance in the bar. Patrons around them drinking and watching sports completely in their own world, right? Correct. No kissing scripted there? No. Mr. Baldoni didn't express to you that the scene would include kissing? No. But there was no kissing. So, and you hadn't discussed the dance scene at scene 40 with Miss Lively prior to filming? No. Also on that call sheet is scene 27, the karaoke scene. Wayfarer did not call you for the karaoke scene, correct? Correct. But again, there's no kissing in the karaoke scene. As a result, you were not on set for the filming of the karaoke scene. Correct. And Mr. Baldoni did not express to you that the karaoke scene would include any form of intimacy, including kissing. Correct? Correct. Okay. Now they're discussing the intimate scenes involving the actors playing young Lily and young Atlas that you discussed with counsel earlier. Okay. You mentioned at some point Mr. Baldoni added simulated sex between the characters of young Lily and young Atlas. Correct. And here's the stupidest, most outrageous thing about all this. They keep harping on this. And those characters were under the age of 18. Correct. These actresses and actors were in their mid-20s. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is so stupid. Like, let's not pretend Blake Lively hasn't portrayed teenage sex in her career. Like, she pretended to be a teenager having sex in other projects she's had. So why is she like blowing up about other actors in their 20s portraying underage characters? It's ridiculous. So it's like they're trying to make this like a creepy, like perverted, underage like sex thing, but it's like teenage sex is depicted in film and TV all the time. I mean, anybody's watched One Tree Hill or watch Gossip Girl, you know what I mean? She did sex scenes in Gossip Girl, that's right. Okay. Just ridiculous. Didn't Blake release that she was in charge and it was HR? Yes. Yes. I guess she should have made a point of that, right? Okay. At the time that Mr. Baldoni added simulated sex between the characters of young Lily and Atlas, the actors portraying those characters did not have executed nudity writers. And she says, no, they didn't, right? And that's because the script changes, like I said, guys. So this is all meant to confuse us as people who don't work in film. Most of the people watching this video and I don't work in film, right? So it's all meant to confuse you. The saying the characters are underage is meant to confuse us. The actors were in their 20s, okay? They weren't even, also they weren't actually having sex. Let's point that out because I think Blake gets a little confused sometimes. They weren't actually banging on the camera, right? So there's that. And it's meant to confuse us to think like, oh my God, it wasn't in the script, as if scripts don't change. Scripts do change. Okay. Let's see. Because simulated sex between those characters had not previously been included in the script. She says, correct. We wouldn't produce nudity writers for the scenes that don't involve simulated sex or nudity. Okay. Then they bring out a document. And they skip some pages here, so I'm not really sure what goes on there. But portraying young Atlas together or separately. I don't know what the question is because it cuts off. But she says, so we had a rehearsal on a few days beforehand at mine and Isabella's request, because that's very important, especially when scenes had been added that weren't initially in the script. And I believe I spoke with either Alex first or Isabella first, and I would speak to them separately in person. The lawyer says, who attended the rehearsal regarding the simulated sex scene between Alex and Isabella's characters? She says, I was present. I spoke to them each individually. Then we had a conversation together. And then Mr. Baldoni came in and we talked through the scene. And I cannot recall if Jamie Heath was there. So it sounds like everybody's doing everything they're supposed to do. The intimacy coordinator there is there to make sure everything is choreographed and safe. And she will be there on the day of filming in case something changes and they want to do something else. So the fact that Miss Lively is like up in arms about this underage scene between two 20-year-olds who are consenting adult actor and actress, like, what the fuck? Do you recall during that rehearsal that Mr. Baldoni added more unscripted intimacy? She says, yes. So I was a bit surprised when we did the rehearsal, just because one, the position that had been described was probably more of an, this again sounds a bit strange, but it's an unusual position for a first time of a scene portraying the loss of virginity. So the main thing with the intimacy coordinator, when she's kind of vetoing Justin's suggestions, is like, I don't think that's realistic. And I actually agree with her on this. With the first time losing the virginity scene. And we'll hear a little bit more about what she has to say, but it says, what was the position? And she says, so the position was the female on top of the male very close together. Mr. Baldoni wanted the simulated sex scene between young Atlas and Lily, portraying the first time having sex with young Lily's character very closely on top of young Atlas's character. That's the lawyer asking the question. The intimacy coordinator says, correct. Initially, it was seated. And that's where I'm like, okay, her suggestion to change that was probably the right call. Because I don't know, a lot of, like, losing your virginity is kind of awkward for a lot of people, not everybody, right? But a lot of people. And so these two teenage characters who seemed a little shy with each other, because I've watched the movie, right? I don't think that they would lose their virginity in that manner either. Like, it seems like the way they ended up doing it was more realistic. I would agree. So she says, initially they were supposed to be seated, and like she was sitting on top of him, right? But I suggested that was probably too extreme for this, and then suggested that it was, if that was the required position, again, maybe it's better if it's in this position, right? So he's saying he wants them to portray it that way. She's saying maybe it makes more sense to do it this way. It's all very mechanical, safe, controlled. Like, there's nothing wrong happening here. Everybody's an adult. Like, okay. The lawyer says, did Mr. Baldoni express that it was important to him to have young Lily's character on top during this intimate scene? My comment, Lauren, here is, who fucking cares? If he's talking through his vision of the scene and he wants to have the girl on top, like, so? Anyways, Lizzy says, yes, that was the position that was requested. The lawyer says, Mr. Baldoni requested that young Lily's character be on top during the sex scene in which her character had lost her virginity. Correct. Okay. And you found that unusual. She says, it's not typical of the position for a scene of losing virginity. And I would agree with that. So, I mean, we most of us have lost it by now, right? Most people watching this will have lost it by now. So it's like, most of us know that, like, it's not always like picture perfect movie cinema, like hot when you lose your virginity, right? You're not like sitting on a dude on top of a chair. Like it's like awkward and timid sometimes. And not everybody, like I said, some people are just like, I'll go ahead, right? That's fine. But like a lot of people, it's a little more awkward than that. It's a little more vanilla than that, right? They're like, not that sitting on a chair is super exciting, but like it's a little more typical, like missionary boy on top of girl just doing it for the first time awkwardly, right? You know, it's not like perfect, you know. I can't believe we're even doing this. Like, I can't believe we're even reading about this in this level of detail. That's how stupid this is. This is a federal court, ladies and gentlemen. We're using our taxpayer dollars to fund this case, where the lady's complaining that two people in their 20s are pretending to have sex while pretending to be teenagers. That's, whew. The federal judiciary, one of our branches of government, is being wasted on this. I would just like the severity of that to be hammered into all of your brains the same way that this is going to be hammered into mine. Okay? You know what I mean? So, all right, let's move on. I'm not a smut reader. You guys suck. Okay. Mr. Baldoni also added additional nudity to the simulated sex scene between young Lily and young Atlas, correct, during rehearsal? She says, I don't recall if there was nudity. I know that we went down to underwear, and I was very specific that this underwear needed to be full coverage. Did Mr. Baldoni suggest that the underwear should not be full coverage? She says, I didn't let that suggestion happen. Because, so she talked to the actor and actress and knew what they were comfortable with. So she says, I didn't let that suggestion happen. Okay, fine. And they're saying, did you perceive that he might want to? Did you think he might want to suggest that? Oh my God. She says, did you think he might want to suggest that these people about to have sex would be in their underpants? Like, what the fuck? Okay. She says, so I made this suggestion very clear at the beginning that there was to be full coverage underwear. Okay. The lawyer asked, was it your impression that Mr. Baldoni wanted young Lily and Atlas to be portrayed wearing less than full coverage underwear? She says, all I can say is that I removed that from ever being on the table by suggesting what I suggested. Okay. The attorney asks, why did you feel you needed to strongly suggest that the actors of young Lily and young Atlas be in full coverage underwear? Lizzy says, because again, I didn't want them to have any expectation that there was going to be nudity in this scene, because again, when I spoke to the actors, I was very clear that there was going to be no nudity during the scene, and you can see that reflected in the writers. So like the way that they have the intimacy coordinator set up and the way they have these kind of things set up contractually, it's actually really comforting to know that there's someone advocating for these people so they don't, because it's like awkward. It would be really awkward to have to go up to your boss and like talk mechanically through his kind of ideas about the intimacy, and then to feel like you maybe couldn't say yes or no to that, right? So the fact that they have this coordinator here, I feel like is very helpful, and I'm happy about that. Somebody says, look how red Lauren's face is. My face was red before we started, I promise. It's pretty much always red, and people always ask me about that, but like my face is always red. If I drink caffeine, my face is red. If I do any sort of exercise for any amount of time, my face is red. I can't help it, okay? Give me one sec. Okay. Did Mr. Baldoni express to you that he wanted that scene to include nudity? She says, I can't recall in detail. All I know is that in my capacity as intimacy coordinator working with actors who are doing their first time sex scene, simulated sex scene, my strong suggestion was to always keep them in underwear. This is like very understandable and normal. Like, okay. Was it your impression that Mr. Baldoni wanted young Atlas and young Lily, the characters portraying them, to be nude while they were having sex? Let's see. And then they cut off the answer. I would like to know the answer to that question, but of course, like I said, they only include certain pages, so we never get to see her answer, probably. So she's here on page 175 answering a question, and she says, so partial nudity would be maybe nudity above the waist. So that would include, for example, someone who may be a female who may be topless. That would include partial nudity. Full nudity is, as in what we would describe as frontal below the waist and frontal above the waist. For Miss Ferrer's character in the scene, did undressing to her underwear include keeping a bra on? Lizzy says yes. So we're still talking about Isabela Ferrer in this scene. And mind you, like, Isabela Ferrer isn't suing anyone. Isabela Ferrer never made a complaint. Isabela Ferrer still, to this day, is not complaining about this scene and the way the sex scene was portrayed. So, like, the fact that Blake's attorneys have to harp on this so much and pretend that they're outraged over these characters being underage, right? Like, the actors, again, in their mid-20s, but the characters being underage is pathetic. It's really pathetic. Like, the person they're talking about ad nauseum is not filing a lawsuit. Does not have complaints about that. Even her stupid complaints about licking the thing off the spoon or whatever doesn't include whatever they're complaining about right now. Like, she never said any of that. So, all right. I mean, she said the spoon thing, which is ridiculous, but this, like, the thing they're angling at right here, the scene between the two teenage characters who are actually very adult actors, she never complained about that. Okay. For Miss Ferrer's character in the scene, did undressing to her underwear include keeping her bra on? Liz says yes. Okay. Let's see. There's a text exchange. This is the day you rehearsed the simulated sex scene between Atlas and Lily. Okay, young Atlas and Lily. And we read these texts in the beginning, and this is why I told you, like, wait till we get to the context in the actual deposition, you'll see. At 4:48 p.m., you sent a text that said, fuck. This is a lot. He's asking a lot, and so much is unscripted. Mr. Lambert responds, I know, Finch is talking to me about it now, and goes on, what is he asking them to do? The lawyer says, you respond, so undress to underwear, if there's all caps, any way for me to be there, please, because this is a ton. So she's saying there's a lot, and she wants to be there for the actors as the intimacy coordinator. And? Correct. Why did you send this message? What prompted it? She says, when we were rehearsing, it became clear that, again, the position on top felt a bit strange. And again, this is where I'm making adjustments in the rehearsal. So even the intimacy coordinator makes adjustments. Unscripted. That's not scripted, right? It's not the same way that it was written. Even the intimacy coordinator is helping to make adjustments. These things happen. This is where I'm making adjustments in the rehearsal to make sure that, again, she is not seated astride him in a seated position, that we are much closer lying down face to face. So it felt a lot because, again, this was a new ask of an actor. It's not an illegal ask. It's not outside of SAG guidelines. Let's say it again for the people who think that this is still an underage sex scene. It's not an illegal ask. It's not outside of SAG guidelines. I'm glad that I'm there because, again, I'm being able to facilitate this as is my job to do. Directors will ask actors of things. Directors will ask things of actors that may seem extreme or unusual, and it's my job to facilitate that. And you can see me here facilitating this. Nothing unusual was happening. It's very clear from what you just said. Okay. The question is, so during the rehearsal, Mr. Baldoni added a lot of unscripted content to the simulated sex scene between the characters of young Atlas and young Lily? She says, correct. Do you recall what specifically he added? Lizzy says, so the scene is an interrupted scene. And then, of course, it cuts off. They don't want you to see the rest of that. Probably because it doesn't support the story that they're telling. Here she starts out talking. I don't know what the prompt was again because they skipped ahead to 185. It says, simulated sex scene, things are changing. Okay. Scene 45, you mentioned was a cookie baking or eating scene. She says, correct. Did that scene as scripted involve intimacy between young Atlas and young Lily? She says, yes. It involved like kissing on the counter. We'd actually walked through that scene in the rehearsal on, I think, the 19th. We had already discussed what that would look like. So we had talked about moments here and there that we would like to see. They had introduced things that they had discovered with themselves. It's important to note here that these two actors, from my point of view and from what they said, were very comfortable with each other. This is not a scene I am concerned about in terms of these actors working together. We are now entering a typical dynamic between director and actors. And then this weird question, it says, as opposed to director and actor? Okay. She says, okay, I get it now. I thought the attorney was asking that. I was like, what a stupid question. No, she says, as opposed to director and actor. I get it now. Okay. Did you have the concerns that if you were not on set for the filming of scene 45, that Mr. Baldoni might add additional intimate content that had not been rehearsed previously? She says it was a possibility, but again, not from at this point, it didn't seem like a nefarious thing. It didn't seem like a nefarious thing. She said above, even directors ask this stuff. Okay. It felt more like a sort of new idea, chaotic on the spot tactic. Let's try that rather than anything sinister from my interactions with him thus far. So this is, again, why I was telling you guys earlier. The way she describes him and his like kind of improvising or on the spot saying this or that sounds like somebody with ADHD, which as we know he has, which as we know Blake's attorneys badgered him about during his deposition. So he's literally just doing his job. All right. The lawyer says, but at that time, you had the sense that if you were not there for the scene 45, he might add additional intimate content that had not been rehearsed. She says, I wanted to make sure I was there because these are two actors. Again, this is their first scene with any intimate content. So it's sensible that I'm there. And of course, the intimacy coordinator being there is not a problem or a weird thing. Like, the lawyer says, based on your interactions with Mr. Baldoni to that point, did you have concerns that he would add additional intimate content to the scene that were not rehearsed? She says, it was a possibility. At 1:09 p.m., you write to Mr. Lambert, I forget this isn't normal show situation. What did you mean by that? And then, of course, they cut it off. Again, they don't want you to see her answer that question for some reason, probably because it doesn't support their version of events. 1 sec. Okay. We're getting closer to the end here. We have one more after this, but it's only 12 pages, so we have 18 pages total left, so we're fine. All right. Let's see. Turn back to this page. Mr. Lambert wrote, and they're asking about a text message. It says, and with Justin, I think it's a good idea if you're there, right? She says, correct. He did not say because of the strike, I think it's a good idea that you're there. Correct. He said because of Justin. Again, they're describing Justin as somebody who's like on the spot, changing things. Sounds a little bit, honestly, scattered and chaotic, maybe, as someone with ADHD. So, like, it's really not that surprising. I think it's a good idea if you're there, correct. He did not say because of the strike, correct. He said because of Justin, correct. They don't ask why. Just note that. They don't ask why. They don't want to know. They want to frame it in a way that's going to sound like it supports their story. So they don't want to know the answer because it might be something, trivial. So, all right. Talking about more text messages here. This is the day the simulated sex between young Atlas and young Lily was filmed. She says, correct. That morning, Mr. Lambert messages and says, okay, good morning. And you respond, we'll see. That is like the stupidest, most ridiculous non-issue I've ever heard, but let's try to make a big deal out about it, shall we? Why did you respond that way? She says, because I knew we had a lot to do that day. I was unconvinced we would get it all. Sounds like a busy day. Maybe she'll be tired at the end of it. We'll see. Better call a federal fucking judge. I mean, what the hell? Why is that? She says, we had 3 big scenes to do, and I thought we would be under significant time pressure to do that. At 10:55 a.m., you message Mr. Lambert and say, OMG, this is wild. He responds, what's happening? She says, just an entire scene of improv. He goes on, haha, yeah. And you respond, wowee, now changing all the action. Okay. Mr. Lambert says, are they having sex on the counter yet? And you respond, give it time. I think we'll throw that in last minute. Okay. The lawyer says, what prompted you to send the message, OMG, this is wild? Liz says, this is a scene about making cookies. We had rehearsed it, and it was fairly chaotic with things changing. Chaotic in what sense? In that there was some components of the piece Kevin McKidd was coming in and interrupting. So Kevin McKidd, the father, is supposed to be walking into the house, and then Atlas, the young boy, because I've watched this movie, guys, too much to my dismay, Atlas, the young boy, has to sneak out of the house, and she has to quickly pretend she was just making cookies alone, and nothing weird was going on. So, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to that, right? So she says that's why it was chaotic. Not because of Justin or like the, intimacy or whatever, but like because of all the moving parts. And there were multiple scenes they needed to get through. She wasn't sure they would be able to get through all of them. Okay. We were placing young Lily on the counter. We were hiding Alex. Alex is Atlas. Alex is the name of the actor. There was some intimate action there. And again, I can't express enough. This is, again, really mainly regarding like the chaotic nature of filming any scene during the strike. Things that would typically be in place are not really in place. And again, it can be anything down from like, we had an oven on set. The cookies were supposed to come out warm. I think at one point they came out cold, like there was just a lot of chaotic action. And with the improv, again, it was a lot of Justin going, okay, now this is happening, and now this is happening, and this is happening. Again, sounds like ADHD. But, and with regards to the intimate action, again, I'm there, I'm on set, I'm navigating that. I make sure we go through a rehearsal. I'm constantly checking in with these two actors because I want to. It literally just sounds like she was busy. Like she had a busy, stressful day. Why are we making a thing out of this? The lawyer says, was Mr. Baldoni adding intimate action during the cookie scene? She says, I believe there was some intimate action that was added, but I will say that's not unusual in this, because what we do is we will make sure that we would do that in rehearsal. We make sure they're choreographing everything appropriately and talking to actors. What is always scripted, again, like obviously if we can follow the script, that's great, but actors will come up with ideas and suggestions that don't always follow the script. So it's not just Justin. The actors pitch in as well. At this point, there's no simulated additional action going on. Sorry. The lawyer says, was Mr. Baldoni adding intimate action to the cookie scene that had not been rehearsed? She says, I believed there was a suggestion of either placing Isabela on the counter or, again, kissing on the counter that may have been extended. Did Mr. Baldoni suggest Isabela, Miss Ferrer, licking batter off the other actor's finger? Yes, I believe. I can't say with 100% certainty, but I do remember a batter situation occurring. And let me show you guys something really quick that's important. Because this is what Blake Lively had Isabela Ferrer complaining about, is this licking scene. And I think at one point she said in her deposition that he wanted her to lick it off a spoon. And in this deposition, they're saying his finger, which either way, it doesn't fucking matter, because here's how it happened in the book that this movie is based on. And this is from CJ. She posted a post from Reddit, and it had the book scene above the deposition description. So Isabela, in her deposition, described this as, there was a scene in my character Lily's in the kitchen, and the other character is making cookies, and there was a note that was a change to the scene in which he was feeding me cookie dough from a spoon. Justin offered that I lick the cookie dough off the spoon and look up at my co-star in a way that deemed, to me, kind of inappropriate. Okay? And here's what the book says. Kill me, because I have to read this. Hang on. I kind of thought, this is the book, guys, the book that the movie is based on. And it's from Lily's point of view. It says, I kind of thought most men were like that, but watching Atlas work his way around my kitchen proved me wrong. Oh, that's a lot of heat. Okay. What are you making? I asked him. I pushed my hands on the island and hoisted myself onto it. All right. Cookies, he said. He walked the bowl over to me and stuck a spoon in the mixture. He brought the spoon up to my mouth, and I tasted it. One of my weaknesses is cookie dough, and this was the best I'd ever tasted. Who wrote this book? I'm sorry. I know who wrote the book, but dude. Oh, wow, I said, licking my lips. He set the bowl down beside me and then leaned in and kissed me. Cookie dough and Atlas's mouth mixed together is like heaven, in case you're wondering. I wasn't, but thank you. I made a noise deep in my throat that let him know how much I liked the combination, and it made him laugh, but he didn't stop kissing me. He just laughed through the kiss, and it completely melted my heart. A happy Atlas was near mind-blowing. It made me want to uncover every single thing about this world that he likes and give it all to him. So that's the scene in the book where he literally, I don't even want to repeat any part of this, but I'm going to. In that third paragraph there, a third little thing, it says, he brought the spoon up to my mouth and I tasted it. I'm blinking for help. What the fuck? What the fuck did I just read? Did Isabela Ferrer even read the book 3 times? That's the worst part. Omar came in at just the right time. He says, "What in the sugar plums?" I was reading the scene from the book because Isabela Ferrer in that scene, he said that her character should lick the cookie dough off the spoon, and she used that as an example of his inappropriate conduct. So I was reading that exact passage from the book where she licks the fucking spoon, but it was just a little spicier. Okay, give me 1 sec. My God. Okay, moving on, please. Moving on. Okay. Did Mr. Baldoni suggest Isabela licking batter off the other actor's finger? She says, yes, I believe. I can't say with 100% certainty, but I do remember a batter situation occurring. So they were wrong. It was the spoon, because Isabela even testified that it was a spoon, but like, it's not really that much of a difference at that point. Do you recall Mr. Baldoni suggesting that Miss Ferrer's character lick batter off the actor portraying Mr. Young Atlas's finger while looking up at him? Correct. I believe she may have been sitting on the counter at that point. And again, this is all things that we can agree on the day. This is me constantly checking in. And again, these are intimate acts. This is the lawyer talking. And again, these are intimate acts that Mr. Baldoni has added after the scene had already been rehearsed. Let's see. And then they cut off. Again, they cut this off because they don't want you to know the answer to the question. They skip 1 page. The 1 page they skip is the answer to that question, which is probably like, yeah, but who fucking cares? So, here, Liz is responding to a question. We don't get the question, but we can see part of her answer. It says, working together and communicating really well. Wonder why they cut off the page before this. Probably because it doesn't look good for them. She's still talking here. It says, as far as I'm concerned, these actors are safe because they're together and I'm watching them communicate. And at no point are they ever expressing discomfort with each other. And for me, that's very important when I'm working as an intimacy coordinator. The lawyer says, did you expect during this scene that Mr. Baldoni would add further additional sexual content? She says, I hoped not. Probably because she didn't want to fucking, I mean, she's having a stressful enough day, right? Did you expect that he might? She says, it's a possibility, but it's also something that would not be allowed to happen because that would have been outside the nudity rider, and I would have stepped in immediately at that point to say, this is outside of the nudity rider. We would not be able to do it for that scene. We do not have a nudity rider for this scene currently. The lawyer says, you would not have permitted Mr. Baldoni to add additional sexual content for the cookie baking scene, correct? I can't believe we're still talking about this, guys. But she says, any simulated anything that would have required a rider, absolutely not. That would have been a phone call to SAG straight away. And the lawyer says, but you considered that it might be a possibility that he would attempt to add additional sexual content to the scene? She says, it was possible. The lawyer says, and are you aware if Isabela and Alex had executed nudity riders in effect at the time of the scene? She says, they both had nudity riders that were sent to their agents, I believe. The lawyer says, do you know if they had executed the nudity writers at that time? She says, by that scene, I don't know. I think one of the actors was going to sign on set. And again, as long as they sign before we shoot the scene, so they can sign on set right before we shoot the scene. It doesn't have to be like at the beginning of the day, because again, that's our 48 hours. That's where our 48 hours, and that's the end of that document. Like I said, there's another short version, shorter one here that I want to skim through to make sure there's nothing else that's left out of that one. But that's it. This one's only 12 pages. Let's see. Okay. Talking about the call with Strasbourg there. One second. Hold on, guys. Okay. All right. Talking on the phone with Lindsay. We read this part in the last one. She grew up in Wales, blah, blah, blah. That's really not important. But we already went over it anyway. So it's talking about the phone call about Blake's boundaries and all that shit. Let's see. I don't think we need anything there. Okay. I think there's a little bit here that I wanted to go over. Yeah. Okay. So we'll start at here after the birth scene questions. I hip line, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Okay. Did the filming stop at some point? Lizzy says, yes, I believe so. The strike was on at the time. And that was very confusing for many productions that were attempting to film at that time. With this show, I think it stopped around the 1st of early June, I think. 2023, and then picked back up like middle of June, maybe a little bit after that. And then it went down again with the strike and then went back up again in early January of 2024. Okay. The lawyer asked, were any intimate scenes involving Blake filmed in 2023? If you know. She says, as far as I'm aware, there were no scenes requiring a writer as discussed with Blake in 2023. Hold on. Are we saying there were no scenes involving a nudity writer with Blake that happened before she demanded the 17-point document be signed? What? My God. And then they start to ask her a question, but it cuts off here to a different page, so we can't see it. And what did you discuss with her, if you recall? And I guess they're asking about her conversation with Blake. She says, we discussed the addition of the scene, what her comfort level would be, and we also discussed what nudity writer language that might look like. And my explanation to her, as it is with any actor, is that this is a ceiling, it's not a floor. We can go up to, but not over that. Okay. I also expressly confirmed with her from my side that there would be no nudity during the scene. Okay. And then the lawyer says, was that scene eventually filmed? She says, correct. Were you on set for that? Yes, I was. Was Blake on set for that? No. So I guess they're still talking about Isabela. So Blake wasn't, like we know this already, but Blake was not on set for the scene that Isabela was in that she's complaining about. Okay. The lawyer says, do you know one way or the other whether Isabela was satisfied with the way that young Lily's sex scene in the film was handled? And then they cut off the page there, unfortunately. Let's see. And they're asking here about nudity, partial nudity, whatever. The lawyer says, so fair to define nudity to include partial nudity where a particular part of the body is exposed, but not necessarily everything. She says, yes. We define nudity as anything that would be seen underneath a bikini or a pair of Speedos. We've already read this part, but yeah. So they're talking about this a little bit more, but one of the most effective ways of doing this is divide the body up into 4 parts. So that typically is above the waist, below the waist, front, and rear. Wait, how does that work? I think I get it. Okay. So if we're talking about exposing a performer's buttocks, we might talk about actor consents to perform rear nudity below the waist, including buttocks. Okay. And when you say we define nudity, who is the we that you refer to? She says SAG, Screen Actors Guild, has the parameters of nudity as the bikini and Speedos. We, as intimacy coordinators, do try and specify that in a bit more of a form, because one of the slightly problematic things that we continually run into is that there are many different types of bikini, and that's something that we consistently run into as an issue. Okay. The lawyer says, on occasion, is partial nudity also includes something that would be visible underneath a one-piece bathing suit? She says, no, it's typically defined as a bikini. Okay. For example, like if someone is wearing a crop top in a scene, that would not be defined as nudity. The lawyer asks, and nudity would also include depicted nudity. So for example, it would be fair to define it as an actor is not physically nude during filming, but is portrayed to be nude on a film. She says, actually, no. So implied nudity is something that we don't typically do a writer for. And that's consistent with the format from HBO, where a lot of this work stemmed from. And what do you mean when you say implied nudity? She says, so implied nudity, for example, this is a scene I did recently. It's if you imagine an actor looking in the mirror and they're supposed to be looking at their naked body, but we are only shooting from the collarbone up, so they are actually in a tube top and sweatpants. We would not just describe that as nude on camera because we are not seeing like nipples, genitalia, and buttocks. Now, I could be buck naked right now for all you know. I'm just saying. Like, I could be buck-ass naked, but I'm not, right? So, like, again, this is such a stupid thing to complain about. Such a stupid thing to complain about. Oh, heavens! I've seen a woman's bare shoulder. I must lick a spoon now. Like, what the fuck are we gonna do? All right, we're almost done for the night, guys. Just give me a sec. Okay. We're only shooting from the collarbone up. So they actually in a tube top and sweatpants. We would just not just describe that as nude on camera because we're not seeing like nipples, genitalia, and buttocks. And what about inferred nudity? Implied and inferred nudity would probably be the same thing. So really, it's about what the camera sees, not what the camera doesn't see. So for example, if someone, we have this a lot where someone might be under sheets and say they're wearing like, because they could be wearing sweat shorts and again, a tube top under sheets, they're not nude. It's implied nude, but the camera is not capturing anything that would, in this instance, require a nudity writer. And that right there is going to hurt Blake's case. So. Oh, heavens! You can see my underpants under this prosthetic belly. Whatever will I do? All right. There are occasions where actors say, I would like a nudity writer for implied nudity, but typically it will get kicked back by legal because it does not follow the form from SAG-AFTRA of the nudity that's on the bikini. Blake's got nothing, dude. All right. So this, they ask a question here, but they skip a page. They skip a lot of pages, so you don't get an answer to the question. I think we've seen this. We saw this in the other pages. Yep. We saw this already. The just a hand on throat and one on leg, which was referring to Kevin McKidd, the woman who acted as the mother. So they try to make this again sound nefarious. It says, let's see. They're asking about the text. It says, yeah, just a hand on throat and one on leg. Do you see that? She says that was in reference to the action with the parents of Lily Bloom. And originally that was going to be like a slightly more explicit scene, but that got downgraded to a very simple action. So again, no nudity writer required for that. It's just standard choreography. It's just standard choreography. Again, and this was between the actors that play the parents. So, and that's it. That's the last of it. So, well, I mean, we kept this under 2 hours, so that's nice, right? But that was everything from the intimacy coordinator that we currently have on the docket as far as I know. So that's all I've seen as far as like text messages and deposition pages. I feel like that is, again, detrimental to Blake's case in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to the partial nudity or implied nudity. And they're saying like that's not something we really do a writer for. And also, if we did try to do one, SAG-AFTRA would like kick it back. So, you know, that's, and like also her saying the actors were safe. She's basically saying like it was chaotic, yes, but that's because we were just doing our jobs and there was a lot to get done. You know, this is just so crazy. And she's like trying to make mountains out of molehills with this stuff. And I just think it's bizarre. But like, Jill 199, thank you for becoming a member. I appreciate you. Elisa Olea 22, thank you for the $10. I thought the entire depots besides IIPs were supposed to be unsealed. Just the pages, so the exhibits were unsealed, right? And the exhibits did not include, for the most part, except for Justin and Jamie's, I guess, entire depositions. So Blake's was just sections, everyone else's was just sections. They did try at one point to put Blake's whole deposition into the docket. I will say it was like improper timing at that time. I didn't feel like that was going to fly, and it didn't. It got struck. So we will probably never see her full deposition. I personally think that we should be able to, especially since she leaked the full depositions of Jamie and Justin with their home addresses and everything. I think she is the plaintiff. If she wants people to buy her story, should let everybody see her full deposition, but she's not going to, because I don't think that there's much of a story to buy. So that's just my opinion. So, all right, guys, I'm going to take off, hopefully go to bed by midnight tonight, and, you know, go lick cookie dough off a spoon or something. So I'm going to redirect you over to my friend Shizzy Wiznut. Please send him robot and bacon emojis in the chat. Tell him Lauren sent you and much love. That's all I got for now. I will be back either tomorrow night or Wednesday night. We'll see. We'll see. I haven't decided yet. Actually, I saw there was Amber Heard had just done something, and it sounded really interesting. And I heard she actually like compared herself to Blake Lively in that. I'm not sure. So I'm going to actually, before I go to bed, I'm going to look that up. And tomorrow I may cover that during the day or something. So we'll see. All right. Anyways, you guys will find out when I'll be back next, when I find out too. So, all right. Bye, everyone. Much appreciated. See ya.